I had a conversation with Spetsnaz the other week on the topic of finding your voice, but after listening to the final recording afterwards, I realized my microphone levels were maxed out on the streaming software we were using. Being a perfectionist, my first instinct was to schedule a time in the future to re-record another conversation again on the same topics. But the conversation was unique, and there's no way we'd naturally hit similar salient points the way we had just done by trying to manufacture it again in the future. So I've leveled it out and cleaned it all up as best I can. Enjoy.
A mate of mine, he said to me, this guy, he talks a lot about politics and how it sort of relates back to, I guess, the male experience. This is a guy that I've done martial arts with for years. He's an ex-veteran as well. He was over in Russia. Not that I was in the military service, just get that out there. But he's a veteran. A lot of the guys I interact with are ex-military veterans. But he said to not think critically as a man. He said it's an abdication of responsibility and it's an abdication of self. And he said, as men, we have to start articulating what we're thinking. We have to, the direction that we're going with society at the moment is just this hive mind where it's just groupthink culture. And it doesn't matter what evidence you have. It doesn't matter the statistics that you have. It doesn't matter about your experience and the other experience of other men. It's just they've already formulated their opinion, and that's it. That's sort of where we're going. And as a result, I think men really need to start stepping up, and not in a man-up sense, but just for themselves personally. They need to start articulating what they're thinking and what they're feeling.
Yeah, but I kind of also try and empathize with or sympathize with somebody who might not be as easily drawn to or is interested in, say, literature or writing as say you and I might be.
Yeah.
So I can understand where it's harder, whereas for you and I, we'd sort of revel in jumping on that. If someone, life hands us a blank sheet of paper and saying life is meaningless, people like you and I go, great, I can take control of it. Like I feel emboldened. I feel sort of some sense of direction that I can steer this ship. Whereas other people don't have that in them. They, whether they want to follow or be sort of led, or they want someone to give them, the 12 rules for life or something. Those kind of people, they're not interested in developing their own philosophy. They don't find, and I'm not talking like, the person who is or isn't is any better or less, but just an innate drive from that point. So when you tell someone, okay, this could be the answer, and someone's saying, oh God, it's the most uninteresting thing. Have you got anything else? Yeah. So that's the mindset. Whereas for you and I, and others in the manosphere, especially the guys who create content, because I'm guessing that the impulse to create content and continually search for answers and sharpen yourself is exactly that kind of personality that is driven towards making sense of things and working things out and et cetera, et cetera. Whereas other things, it's like, no, I'd rather be the audience. I'd rather be the consumer. Like, give me the answers. I'm not interested in that stuff. It's great that you're making it. Yeah. It's a difference between, say, myself, like I watch movies and I pay attention to, I could use that in one of my clips. I pay attention to the craft of putting it together, what's behind the scenes, what led from, X to Y. Whereas other people they don't see it. It's the same kind of person that watched The Matrix and didn't get the philosophical underpinnings. All they got was the action, and it was just thrilling, and that's all they need. It was entertaining, which fine, but that's a difference. How do you reach that kind of person?
Well, I'd say that years ago, I mean, I wasn't able to articulate what I thought. I wasn't able to interact with people on a social level, and it's something. There's a guy called what's it, Monday, F.A. Monday, or Monday, Chad Monday. I don't know what his name is.
Monday,
but yeah, he was around it, and he was talking about blind spots, and that was something that sort of resonated with me. I had blind spots when I was in any kind of social situation because I didn't know how to interact, and some people have a case of social anxiety. They feel if they speak up, they're going to be judged. They feel that it's going to be contrary to someone's opinion, therefore the pressure is going to go on me. That's not what I had. The anxiety came from the fact that I didn't know what to say, because I didn't understand the language of other people. I'd get frustrated, and I see that with a lot of guys that come out of prison or the rest of it. They could go into a cafe, and they've never ordered a coffee before. and it becomes this incredibly stressful experience for them. Little things like that, and that was similar to me. So I had to understand how to start interacting with people. And what I found pretty quickly I had to adapt to is that I found the most important thing in any kind of communication is to hear what isn't being said. So I had to start watching other people and understand how people interact, because all of that was foreign to me. Because when you're in a social environment, you're watching other people. You're in a tribe, essentially, watching other people's body language, and you can see the pecking order. You can see the social fluency, and I didn't understand that. And that's a form of communication between people where they can see that you're coming from it's almost like a form of testing someone. I can see you're like me, this natural flow between you and I. And I was like a elephant in a china shop. I just didn't know how to interact on that basis.
Yeah, so, just to sort of add, it's an important point not to gloss over what is not being said, the subcommunication. Or probably just directly what's not being said, but being a great observer and learning from your ongoing experiences of observing people, from the differences for what they say to how they act. And this is never more important than with women, like the cliches, you judge them by their fruits, how they act, not on what they say, because a lot of people might proclaim what's important. Guys in the manosphere proclaim what is important. We know what's important, but it's not always the case that follows through. And a lot of people just trust, Spetsnaz says X, Y, and Z were his ethics, so I can trust it 100%. He's not going to waver from that. But they miss the human aspect of, have you observed people, and people are fallible?
I guess with a lot of men, it's starting from what you know. And a lot of guys today, a lot of young guys, they haven't had any kind of coaching or mentoring, so they don't know what that looks like. So they're trying to understand, well, where do I stand? How do I interact with people and all the rest of it? Because I see a lot of guys now, just from my everyday life, because I've become sort of quite inquisitive now. I'm trying to understand what's going on for men. And I think Stardust has sort of hit the nail on the head. He made a statement that a lot of men today are invisible. So there's a lot of disenfranchisement. There's a lot from disenfranchised, they're cut off from community, from social networks, from family networks. All of that's gone, and the blame is still coming back squarely on the man. But that young man doesn't know where he stands. And the point where they need to come from, because there's going to be no male mentoring there. There's going to be no guidance in that regard. So they're basically left to their own devices. But where I started from, because I had to start from scratch trying to integrate with people, normal 9 to 5 people. I didn't know how to talk to them. I didn't know what their language was. So I had to start from what felt right instead of what I thought that they would see was right, because I was completely off base. So I think a lot of people, they get hindered, or they feel hindered, trying to conform to what other people want them to say, to avoid judgment, to avoid rejection. So they soften their opinions and they refuse to express how they truly feel. So
this is the tricky human dynamic, isn't it? It's kind of like, if I want to find out who I am in relation to other people, to confirm my thoughts, I have to speak to somebody. I can't just swim with those thoughts in my head, a hive of ideas swimming around driving me mad. I need to express them. Well, I mean, the first easiest way I always advocate people do is writing it down to sort of see your thoughts. But the natural way is to converse with other people. And so then you've got this inclination to be agreeable so that you can have an audience stay there, so you can be social and find out what you think and develop a personality and a character and interests and find out what you like in life and what you don't. So there's this sort of subway of being agreeable so you can have an audience to live through and find out whether you're being real or not. So it's a kind of funny thing, because you can't always do it on your own. Like I said, if you don't have an interest in writing, it's that much harder. What do? You just sort of sit there listening to the ego in your head. It drive you mad.
Yeah. Well, what do they say? It takes 5 times longer to write a sentence than to speak a sentence. So what I found is that through writing, there's a big difference between verbal fluency and spoken fluency, which means a lot of what comes out of our mouths is just verbal diarrhea. So a lot of people, they just don't get clear on the point right from the get-go. So when someone's communicating with me, especially a young guy, a lot of verbal diarrhea will come out, and it's just words. Because I've asked him a question like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" He has no idea, but he's just, "I want to engage with you." So,
yeah.
And his whole history comes out in the process. Okay, this is where he's coming from.
Yeah, they're filling space with words, like saying,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying, and I'm doing this, and it's like, man, you're just throwing words at me, like.
And what I'll throw back to them is, okay, I'll let it come out, and then I'll ask them. I say, "What do you mean by this?" I'll drill down, and then he gets clear on his point. So for me, it's always getting clear on that initial point. Right, so it's communicating your thoughts regularly, but also getting down and putting them in order. Like if you sit down and write bullet points, like I do before I do a video, I'll put bullet points down. So I've got an order of where I want to go with. So I have a clear standpoint. But if you don't have a clear standpoint, it's very difficult to have clear thoughts, and that's how we have to train the mental process before we speak. So that takes practice. But the only way that you're going to get there is to actually start speaking the truth. So you have to go with your instinct. Okay, this person is crossing my personal boundaries. I have to stand up for myself. So I used to do that. Jordan Peterson, who I got a lot of criticism for, but he had a very good point. He said, just stand up for yourself. He says, you don't have to be abusive to anybody, but just state your point. He says, take up space physically. He says, speak with a full voice. He says, and speak from a point of truth. And that's very true. No one will talk down to you if you're portraying that level of confidence and you're speaking with a full voice. Okay, and you may lose the argument. That's fine. You've stated how you feel. You've articulated it. You've defined your boundaries, and you'll get stronger and stronger and stronger. As you do that, you'll find you're carved out of stone. So that's where I started with. And I was off base so many times, but I had to do it the hard way. I had to find out, okay, that's not right. Okay, and sometimes I'd ask for feedback. Well, was that the right thing I should have done? Just no, you should have done this. But people aren't going to volunteer that information. It's going to come through trial and error.
Well, I mean, the marketing says that like a man should be born confident and born with the rule book already in his blood and his bones. So he shouldn't have to ask, "Am I doing the right thing? Am I communicating well? Am I picking the right direction? Am I strong enough mentally or physically?" Like you have to be confident, and it's basically. A man in a lot of ways, especially today with no male mentors or fatherless homes, it's like you have to fake everything. It's like this fake it till you make it without actually ever making it, because no one's telling you the right thing. I mean, all we hear is, for men, the message is be a better woman. That's all men are hearing. And this is the thing I found is like how a while ago it clicked for me, like, how am I supposed to find my voice out there if I can't even try and articulate it from my own male stance, my own experience? And I realized, like, women don't want my opinion. Gynocentrism doesn't want my opinion. They want a woman's opinion coming out of my mouth. They don't want my opinion. The thing is, so then you have to be not defiant, but have that kind of will, like, no, my opinion matters. If you're getting so angry at me, then of course I matter, because your anger towards me is so heightened. I seem to be the problem. So that should tell me, like, I exist, because I'm always irritating, it seems like everybody out there. So if I do exist, then you want me to take control? I will. But I'll take control with myself calibrated at the center, and then I'll give everyone else like a secondary role in sort of that thought process. And it sort of helped me when, like you said, until you found the words to defend yourself, not argue, but defend your position, to sort of let people know that you exist. There's a voice here, there's a person here, there's an entity, there's a light coming from here, where, they typically a woman, like, she wouldn't like something you said, or you wouldn't agree with her. What helped me was always reminding myself, hey, I have a right to my opinion here, and I'd verbalize it. I'd say to my ex, like, what, my opinion doesn't count? Simple as that. Like, whatever they don't like you said, like you referenced Jordan Peterson, just at the forefront of your brain, try and tattoo something that sounds like, what, I can't state my opinion? What, my opinion doesn't matter? What, I don't matter here at all? It's just whatever you want? I don't exist here? So if you can try and articulate something like that, like, I matter, I'm here, my opinion matters. Don't you tell me that I can't voice my opinion. If something like that can come out as a reflex if man can train himself over time, that will smooth out so many paths for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's where I come from when I'm trying to communicate with someone, no matter how heightened the situation gets. I could be talking to an inmate, I could be talking to a cop, I could be talking to whoever, but I'm approaching that interaction from a place of care. So it's self-care for myself, and it's care and consideration for the other person. It takes a while to get there, to understand that perspective, but I'm caring about the person I'm communicating with, because I'm trying to fashion a message that they're going to understand. So I've got to understand the objective, what I'm wanting to say. So I'm going to lead them to where I want them to be. So have the objective position in my mind. I have to understand their position, the context of what we're discussing, their level of understanding. So I could be talking to an inmate, so I've got to speak his language. I've got to, I wouldn't say come down to his level, but I've got to relate in a way that he's going to understand. So it's going to be a very bare bones approach. So, and the way that I'm doing it is I'm coming from a very honest place of expressing the emotions behind the words. If I do that, everything else takes care of itself. But that takes a while to get to that point. But it starts with that initial, start speaking what you feel, but you don't have to do it in a confrontational way. And I think a lot of men don't understand that component of it, because they can jump off and they get very emotional, and that's a very female trait. And that leads to very bad consequences. Because I'm always trying to bridge that gap. When I'm talking to an inmate or an ex-con, I'm trying to get them to think about, before they act, what's going on in that process. Like, I had a guy call me a few months ago, and he said us in a hotel room at a party with a bunch of people, and somebody said something to him. And he called me up on the phone. He says, I'm going to kill this guy. He says, I'm going to go to the drawer in the hotel room. I'm going to take out a knife. I'm going to stab this guy. I said, congratulations. I said, you called me. Well done. He said, what do I do? And I said, walk away. But, that's a huge step for him.
Mm.
But that's how quickly it happens, So that's an extreme example. But it's got to start off that jumping off point.
Yeah. It makes you realize, like, if you can, I've never been that sort of hot-headed macho guy. Mm. It always, I never sort of reacted immediately. I used to sometimes admire, I had one particular friend where he went from 0 to 100, and, he might have gotten into fights and arguments, but sometimes he stood up for himself, in an instant. And I always admired that, whereas for me, my mental hard drive would be rebooted. It'd take me a while to process what happened, and then I need to come back later, and often it'd be too late in arguments, with confrontations and so forth. But I always kind of kick myself, like, I didn't stand up for myself, and now it's too late. But then again, when you look back on it, my friend got into so much trouble, and he had more losses than victories. Sure, it was admirable that he quickly defended himself, and it turned out correctly sometimes, but it was really unconscious. So, in aggregate, I'd rather sort of step back.
Yeah, definitely.
And that sort of ability, like when you're talking to someone, when someone's trying to make you go their way or have their opinion, typically with a female, if you can step back and go, no, I need time, or I'll think about it, and they keep pushing you to say, no, now, you need to give me the answer now, the answer I want to hear, and they might use language to sort of gaslight you and say, well, if you love me, you'd this and this, or any decent person would want to give this and this answer, or would want to do this and this. And you're being almost emotionally blackmailed, and you feel claustrophobic, and you sort of, you want to sort of breathe again. So you do the easiest thing, which is, well, I'll just give them what they want in this situation. What does it cost me? I'll get out of it. No big deal. But those little concessions over time, it develops a habit where you have a habit of just going, yeah, I'm an easygoing guy. I don't want any trouble. Really, they're not swinging a fist at me, so I'll lay down for everything, because it's the big thing to do. You can convince yourself that it's the Zen thing to do. I'm above this. I'll let this person who's manipulating me or always taking to take more, because, I'm bigger than that. I don't need it. I'll give him a victory after victory after victory. And it's like, on aggregate in your life, like, how many things have you given over that were unfair?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Guys do that far too often.
It has a cumulative effect. I mean, people don't realize unconsciously how it develops your reflexes. Like I said, I admired my friend for quickly standing up for himself. That part I admired. But the good way to develop that quick reflex to immediately know how to stand up for yourself is to, as we were discussing, get good at articulating these ideas through your mouth. How to talk about life, defend the things that are important. So then when those situations come, you can do that admirable thing and straight away defend yourself verbally, maturely and stoically, because you've trained yourself mentally and through sort of a lexicon that you can do that. Like you've got a mental answer for every subject because you've got an interest in it, especially with things to do with life and women and so forth that we sort of, a lot of guys wrestle with. There's no point saying, these big things that are probably the central parts of my life that frustrate me, that are probably the main pedestrian things that just happen in life, men and women bumping into each other, even in a platonic sense, and talking to each other and having differences of opinion. If I'm not going to be interested enough to articulate and know a calibrated stance from a male point of view on these subjects, if I'm not going to care about it enough, but women, they always care about it, don't you worry. They always care about the female point of view. If you're not going to care about the male, what do you expect to happen?
Yeah, exactly. And communication with people, especially with men and women, should be a two-way process. And the most important part of that is going to be feedback. So we're going to be judging or observing that person in regards to their non-verbal and the verbal behavior. And like you say, you've got to judge a woman based on her actions. But it's very difficult in this day and age because everything's so casual. And there's like invisible walls between men and women at the moment, so nobody knows where they stand.
I kind of like, there's part of me that I'm underneath it. I'm a fairly relaxed, nice guy, but part of me is kind of learned from my experience, and it's almost like I'm defending a person I care about, that sort of vulnerable part, and I don't want them to be taken advantage of anymore. And so I kind of protect that. And so part of me is like, I know forgiveness is a great thing in and of itself, more for you than for the other person, but then it translates afterwards to the other person too, but it's really for you. But for me, it's like when they expect you just to forgive, a blank slate forgiveness, no matter their actions, no matter their repeated actions. For me, I find that hard, where people just say, I'll let it go, continually let that go. And part of me feels like it's not right. It's not me being stubborn, but if I'm being affected all the time, I can let go of something that's not affecting me anymore. And some guys think the answer to that is like, just lock yourself away and don't interact with society. Then you won't have to deal with it. That's true. But the world is mine too. I refuse to let them rule the world, and just so I don't have to be irritated by them, I lock myself away. It's like, no, the world's mine. It's not yours. Like either you cooperate respectfully and civilly with me, or there must be another way of doing things. I think that's my interest in working things out, because a lot of guys just tell me, why are you talking with women? Why don't you avoid this? Why don't you live this kind of life? This will ameliorate a lot of those anxieties. But for me, I don't know, I don't find fruit in that area.
No, and a lot of guys that I talk to in everyday life, not guys online, but a lot of young guys and guys going into their 30s now, and guys that have come out of divorces, they'll open up with me, but when they're around other men, they don't talk about this, or they just put on this kind of narrative where they're not affected by it, supposedly. So, but these are really deep issues.
Well, it's like in a guy's nature to be able to take a punch. And that translates to psychologically too. So it doesn't matter. You look in the animal kingdom, like lion cubs climbing all over the lion and nipping at his mane and everything until he gets, he's full of it, and then he sort of barks at them and bites at them and tells them enough. But from women to babies to society to everything, it's kind of a man's being told, part of your strength that everyone admires is to take the punch mentally and physically. You can endure it, and that's something you should be proud of. That's unique to you. But
like when I talk about the lion, that's a good analogy because we should be baring our teeth a lot prior to that. Because it's something you can live with as a man if you feel that you've conducted yourself in a strong and honorable way, where you've protected yourself, you've defined your boundaries, you've stood up for yourself. Could be in any situation, could be at work, could be in any kind of interaction you have with a woman. The worst feeling you can have is the feeling that your boundaries were crossed and you didn't stand up for yourself as a man. So the best thing you can do, you can make peace with that. Okay, I said exactly what was on my mind. I spoke my truth. I stood up for myself, and they didn't cross that boundary. And it's something that men have got to come to terms with. I see so much of that. Men today, I don't know what the word would be, capitulation or complete surrender when they engage with women. I mean, the guys out there are competing for scraps. It's what they put up with is just, it's astonishing to me.
I think part of it is the sort of even the way they speak. I mean, listen to us even from time to time. Even now during this conversation, we talk about men, the plural. I've always kind of been aware of like how people speak too, how they speak to themselves and the language they use. You know what's naturally coming out of them. So I'm aware of like talking about them or women or men in the plural, and the language isn't very self-reflective. It's always, I want to help men. Men, are subjected to this. Women do this. Society does this. Them. Yeah. And sort of there's never the individual language of I, myself, like I think, my experience has been. It's like it's never drawn into the personal. And I think it's also men are hamstrung by that sort of ability to weather the external. And so our focus is on trying to fix the world and work out men, work out women, all these group external things, never the singularity of you. The language doesn't come from there very often. And I know men are very interested in that. I mean, that's why society's where it is now. Like we're interested in politics, world building. Mentally we love chess games, things that are more complex and bigger than the singularity of just you and looking in the mirror. It's almost boring compared to, this massive video game of complexity that men are more able to sort of wrap their heads around and play with and articulate. And, it's much more alluring to lean in the direction of Elon Musk than it is to kind of lean in the direction of looking in the mirror. It's so, and there's nothing like, I admire the guy, but the degree to which people, him, that God, that's where that's where my language is going to be focused. And that's what I'm going to try and work out, or politics or women or something. But the language is never sort of personalized. Everything is depersonalized. And as a result, the man wonders why he feels empty. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, if you come to like, say, therapy, it's the number one thing you have to do is taking responsibility for your own behavior. And, also accepting that there are certain things out of your control. And it's a lot of guys, they feel that everything's within their control, or should be, because they're male. That's a message that they get. And that just leads to all kinds of problems. Leads to depression, anxiety, all the rest of it. And a lot of guys will go in and they'll start projecting blame as well. They'll spend the entire session just blaming other people for how, their situation now, currently. So if you're doing that, your progress, any kind of progress, is going to be slow to non-existent. So the best thing you can do is start to identify themes. Start to identify patterns in your own life. Start connecting the dots between, the events you experience, and understand how your responses affect your life and affect your actions and drive your actions. So it's trying to find a deeper understanding of how you operate in different circumstances and recognizing those themes and patterns that underlie all those events. So
Yeah, this kind of introspection, I think, was much more common, in history, where it was kind of built upon mentorship, the elders speaking about what it was to be a man. But these days, because of that, there's been such a cord severed sort of chronologically with that. It's almost like being introspective or thinking about how you feel or looking in the mirror. It's seen as feminine now. Like you don't introspect. You don't look in the mirror. That's chick stuff. We fashion the world. We build skyscrapers. We climb mountains. Again, we want to be entrepreneurs. We want to be successes in the eyes of everyone. We're bigger than the self. We're this big external sort of thing that gets validated. I'm an empty shell that only gets filled up by my accomplishments and deeds and aspirations that actually get fulfilled out there. And others will confirm if I'm worth anything in the end, depending on whether I become Elon Musk or if I, own a home or anything. Like, I can only feel good about myself in relation to the validation of whether it's society or women or my parents or whatever. So that's, I think it's very foreign, especially these days with such a recently, like the severing of the last few generations, especially of male mentorship, no men around, especially fathers, where the personalized aspect of being a man is simply just not there. All you're told is by whether it's your mother, the teachers that are invariably female growing up, the media, everything is that you should be a better woman. You got too much of that icky guy stuff left over from history. You need to get rid of that. Aren't you evolved? Like, you're living in the 1800s, man.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I grew up, a lot of things, like I'd be in a situation where I'd see someone, say somebody's acting up, and I'd go over and give him a slap. I'd say, no, he was out of line. The way that he was behaving. He was drunk and he was talking up and all the rest of it. And I went over and gave him a slap. And then he respected me. And likewise, if I was acting up as a young man speaking up, I'd expect someone to slap me. And if they didn't slap me, I'd put a big question mark over that person. Say, can I trust that person? No, I can't, because he can come over and put me in my place. So that's a completely different kind of culture. But at least within those confines, those men that I was talking to, I would go to them for guidance. And I'd ask them, how do I react in this situation? But they'd give me all this, it's not misinformation, because it's a self-preservation strategy within those confines of that kind of enclosed society. But once you stepped out into wider society, I had absolutely no idea how to be a male. I didn't know what it meant. And this is for a very long time. I had no idea. And all I knew was that I kept making mistakes and that people kept cutting me off because ostracizing me because of my reactions. And I wasn't taking, responsibility for my reactions, which is number one, but I couldn't identify them either, or what was precipitating it. I didn't understand the emotional response. I didn't know that the only thing that I could control was my reaction. But, it took me a long, long time before I could start connecting dots. And even to the point of 10 years ago. That was just a few years before I started making content. I still had incredible difficulty expressing myself and trying to understand what is masculinity. What is being a man? How do I navigate a normal relationship? What is that? Relationships with other people, with women, I was completely lost.
Oh yeah, like I'm completely the same, man. I hazard to guess that it's similar with most guys. It was only when I was able to articulate certain words that after the fact, after I spoke them in a confrontation or I stood up for myself verbally and I articulated it better or exactly the way I should have, and I was really proud of myself. It helped fortify me, and you can build on that. But if you're forever silent, if you can't defend yourself with words, if you only defend yourself with physical violence today, you won't last long.
Nope.
So you can only defend yourself and strengthen yourself in the majority of your life for any kind of longevity with the degree to which you have an ability to articulate who you are and stand up for your values without apology. Like I love that kind of challenge, the sort of the literary articulation of being a strong male and being able to clearly talk that way in front of somebody, not to put them down, but to almost plant the flag like I'm proud of myself and here are my thoughts and I have every right to say these things.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like I learned by getting in front of large groups. So sometimes I'd have no idea of the size of the group and all the rest of it. And you're going, oh, fuck, okay. There's a whole huge room full of people, all the rest of it. So I caught on very, very early that, I had to put on a front. But what it was specifically was, it was all non-verbal signals, non-verbal behavior. It's going to ensure that for these people, I'm going to look self-assured. I'm going to look capable, even though I was, in a way kind of bluffing it to start off with. And I think when people talk about just be confident, that's completely wasted phrase, because they're not breaking it down specifically what it is. There's a lot goes into the process. Like we've talked about how to express thought, but the majority of it is just, it's non-verbal.
Just be confident. It's kind of like the stupid saying, if you've lost your keys, well, where'd you leave them? It's like, how the fuck do I do it?
Yeah. And even talking to people, what I found was listening to people. No, active listening, yes, but actually what I was looking for was specific. My objective was I wanted to understand nonverbal behavior. I wanted to understand how people, react, how they interact. So I was looking for signals, like nonverbal signals that's going to reinforce a common point. It's like, cops use, what do they call it, the read method or the peace method. They want to have a series of tics or a series of behaviors and mannerisms that they can nail down and establish a baseline. I'm not looking for signs of duplicity or anything like that. I'm looking for signs. Are they reflecting back on their past? Are they experiencing, emotional distress at this point? Because everybody has coping strategies. Everyone's got a way of deflecting. They're going to interject humor or whatever it is. So you're trying to draw that baseline. So it's the same when you're trying to present something to people. You've got to keep a baseline that they're gonna look at that and say, okay, this person knows what they're speaking about. And a lot of it was I would start off by telling a story. I'd have a story box. That was my toolkit, And by doing that, I'd talk about something I was passionate about. I'd become more expressive in the process. So less of the focus was on the words from the perspective of the audience, and more on me expressing the emotion behind those words. And if I couldn't do that, I'd substitute it. So that was different tone of voice. Different tone of voice can have different meanings depending on how you express it. So I played around with that. It was like almost reading music off a sheet. You're trying to get your voice up different level, different pitches. It's like a harmonious rhythm across a sheet of music. So it's, there's a lot that goes into that.
And then later on, then you can start to play by ear. You don't need the sheet music when you're in front of people. It's just that practice. So I found that as well. I've said in a couple of recent videos where one of the focuses I have is to be able to speak like I write, because I've always found writing to be so sort of easy in expressing and articulating exactly, getting my thoughts down and sort of, poetically paring it down to the smallest amount of words that really kind of resonate, that are really potent. And I want to be able to sort of do that without waffling on too much. And I give myself leeway. Like I'm only human, to pardon the pun, but like when you're just freestyling like this, you're not going to be as sort of mechanically calibrated as a well-read sort of script. But that was something that I remember when I first started doing videos. I liked that. I liked the way my thoughts were accurately coming down on paper, and then I just sort of read them out in the video. But I kind of knew, like I mentioned to you prior, is that I watched these videos that were just people just being honest and intimate and expressing ideas. And I said, the stuff that I find important is much better expressed as just a natural human being rather than a perfect sort of a script. Yeah. And I know it's very easy for guys to sort of rely on that because, we're interested in nature. We're interested in things outside of ourselves. We're interested in mathematics. We're interested in the precision of things, right? And if we freestyle, we miss things. That it's not as precise all the time. But for me, the nice challenge is like the more you write, the more you can kind of get your mind exercised, like you say, with music, say sheet music. And then because you're so used to it, when it comes to normal, conversations, you can play by ear now. When I can kind of sharpen that and continue to keep that muscle, strong, I like the results of when I'm in public in front of people, being able to say, no, I think this, I have a different opinion. And just the feeling of fear over time or the lessening of anxiety of being able to express and talk about anything is such a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. And it comes down to what you say. What you say is far less important than how you say it, how you actually present it in terms of body language and in terms of your voice. So, I mean, it's a lot of times, they say go out there and imagine everybody's naked in the audience. Doesn't actually help. No. But it's like, I mean, that lack of articulation, it typically comes from a point of tension. So tension within the body, but it's a certain level of social anxiety. It's resulting from not being clear about your own thoughts. So you've got to come in there with a clear standpoint, clear objective. But once you get to that point, once you're starting injecting humor and you've got all these techniques down, you're punctuating your words, you're following a rhythm, you've got all the rest of it, you can then take that toolkit out into everyday society and start interacting with people. There's a structure there. There's nothing wrong with starting from a structure, but then you step off the page and you start, utilizing that in everyday life. Back in the day, that used to come naturally because men used to interact with men. That's gone now. The only place that's happening is online. So, what's that reduced to? It's reduced essentially to memes. So it's not coming from a place of experience now. People can throw out messages, don't do this, don't do that. But have you experienced it? No, I haven't. I just know that that's dangerous. I'm not going to do it. Well, that's a really sort of black and white view. If we were in therapy, we'd be looking at that and looking how to challenge that perception based on your experience. Not saying that it's not dangerous, but trying to understand your perspective so you're not deprived of certain experiences. That's not saying that, going out there and get married and, it's not that extreme. It's like, don't deny yourself life. Don't deny yourself experiences. Once you do that, you close yourself off and then you make yourself a target. There's a consequence for cutting yourself off. And that self-knowledge that you have, and that comes across very clearly in your non-verbal behavior as well. I can look at a video with you and I can see it on your face. Self-knowledge builds presence. There's a quiet confidence. I can look at other guys that make videos and there's a level of tension in their body and in their face and their expressions. It's because it's not coming from a place of truth. They're skirting that fence. So they're sitting on the fence, they're not quite sure which direction to go. They're censoring themselves, and it's readily apparent. So when I see that, no matter what they're saying, I don't buy what you're saying because you're not being genuine.
Yeah, that's a good point. That kind of sub-communication, I mean, you look at children being able to pick up on it and absorb so much, not just literally they barely absorb what's being said the younger you go, but they absorb everything else, the truth of everything else. And then when we get older, we become so literal. She said she'd promise this, so therefore she will. It's like, no, trust your instincts. Observe.
Yeah.
Have some confidence in your observations. That little sort of prickly feeling in the back of your head that's sort of saying, it looks like a bit of a red warning sign. It's like, no, don't worry about it. Like she said this, or the government says this. You look at what's going on at the moment. It's kind of like relax. What does your instinct tell you?
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
and guys don't trust their instincts. Like, I can't trust that. I can't listen to that voice. And it's like, okay, what voice are you listening to? Oh, the one that women will smile at, or the one that's approved. It's this censorship of a pragmatic, conservative sort of male or masculinity that sort of really bothers me. It's like, if I can't, how do I find my voice? No, I'm not talking me. I'm talking generally. How does a man find his voice? Because I don't like talking about men. I always try and put it back to me because, I'm the answer. Without being solipsistic. If a man can't speak from his perspective, if I can't, and if I'm only permitted, the only way I, as a being with a penis, am allowed to speak is if I adopt 56 other agendas. I can't speak from my one. The only way you'll tolerate my opinion and you'll give me some sympathy and find my opinion worthwhile, or, you want to hear it, is if I adopt, 56 other genders or make up something. Essentially make me something other than just a normal biological male. The only way women can tend to be strong is to be strong in relation to a weak man. And so if the only way I can actually express a point of view is to sort of dress up in a clownish way and pretend I'm some made-up gender or something, then, you know, she's more sensible and mature than me. Then she'll listen to me. It's kind of like this large matriarchal view, like we'll listen to young boys, but we won't listen to men.
Yeah. And it's good, that analogy about a child as well. You know, it's like whenever you're dealing with a child, you know, you could ask them, say, how was your day today? I don't know, good. So you got to drill down. You got to get specific. So you want to get specific about, you know, the people that they interacted with, a specific topic or a book or a place, that sort of thing. So it's trying to flesh out information. So got to get clear on the point so we can drill down on it. Once you do that, once you start asking and probing like that, men open up. I have it all the time, because there's an initial shield that you need to get through. But you're going to tap into something sooner or later that they're passionate about, and you're going to see the energy levels pick up. So, okay, cool. Now we've got something to drill down on. You know, it could be boxing, could be a trade, could be this, could be that. It doesn't matter. But it's, you know, you've got to get past that initial wall. And all I see with a lot of young men today is them putting up walls. Now, I was there myself when I was younger. You know, it's one thing that men – sorry, you've got me thinking about men now. What I did in the past was I had to stop defining myself. So I had to stop sort of putting myself into a nice little box here or a nice little box here, and I've got this moniker here or I've got this. The best thing I did was to step outside of that box and start paying attention to myself. I wanted to be conscious of every moment of what I was thinking, what I was sensing, feeling, desiring, what I was doing. You know, I was wanting to be present and mindful of every single moment, because I'd seen the consequences of actions for other men, and I didn't want to go down that track. But also I wanted to get some joy out of life. I wanted to, you know, be able to not be like normal people, but I didn't want to sell myself short. You know, I didn't want to justify myself to anybody. I wanted to be my own best counsel. But I also wanted to look at things objectively and say that, okay, well, I've got to accept that essentially nothing in this world belongs to me. But at the same time, I'm responsible for myself. So I'm going to say what I believe. I'm going to speak from the point of truth. You know? And some of the techniques I used was, if somebody had asked me my opinion on someone, I'd only talk about their qualities. You know, so there's certain little techniques that you can use to establish a framework or a structure where it becomes, through repetition, you start to build that skills base. And it's all of that kind of knowledge of how to get to that point and build up this level of confidence and this level of articulation, and how to socially engage and how to engage in all these different environments that are an absolutely necessity for males, because they're judged on first impressions far greater than females. And to put into boxes far greater than females. All of that's missing. All of that's lacking.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, like I said in that last video, I said the internet has kind of become an Iron Maiden for young men. It's what they sort of congregate around. But at the same time, it's a lot of walls are being put up as well. And I think a lot of that communication is breaking down, where it could be a great opportunity to get it out, but it doesn't seem to be heading down that track.
Yeah. It's in terms of sort of the avenues, or the little sort of little spaces that sort of men can actually just be honest and talk about what they feel is important. I was talking to someone on Discord last night, and we were talking about men having to find these private spaces like this, even though we're being civil in our conversation, to even find out who we are, to know ourselves in relation to the world with language, instead of the script we're told to act by the world. That doesn't seem to ever work for us. You know, we keep butting our heads against the wall. It's like, okay, try again, repeat the same thing, and it doesn't work. And it's kind of like, it made me laugh. I said, look, it's like the heterosexual male today is probably the equivalent to the gay guy like 60 years ago. We've got to go to our own clubs. If people find out what we're saying, we're going to lose our jobs. So the heterosexual guy is the equivalent of what the gay man had to put up with generations ago.
Yeah. I mean, with young men today, I can see a lot of that in myself when I was that age, and all I can really talk about is just trying to make connections for myself, how I started to make things happen for myself. But that was through very sort of male-orientated environments. A lot of the interaction that I had in workplaces, through any kind of learning institutions and all the rest was female. So that was primarily female. So I went out and I deliberately tried to interact with men in different environments like boxing, with martial arts, that sort of thing, other kind of pursuits. A lot of those avenues weren't the best. I learned that there's consequences to sort of getting engaged in those different environments, but I had to learn that through trial and error. With a lot of men today, they don't get that opportunity because they're judged right from the get-go, so they don't have the chance to go out there and make mistakes because they've already been judged right from the get-go. So that's one thing. And the other avenues, well, there are no sort of avenues for men to go out there and interact with other males. And a lot of these guys that I see on an everyday basis, they haven't been around women. Some of the guys in their 30s, probably in years, in the better part of a decade. I know guys in the 20s have never even kissed a girl. I'm not saying that as some sort of benchmark. I'm not stating that. I'm saying that, there's...
I hate it that we have to sort of qualify.
I know, it's bullshit. I'm sick of it. I really am. It drives me up the fucking wall.
Not that you're equal, not that there's anything wrong with that, not that I hate. Anyway, I'm not judging you, but I'm just saying, like, I loathe that men today, the most capable men have to kind of apologize to sort of the most insecure. Anyway, go ahead.
It's not a critique on anybody listening. It's not that. It's just, we shouldn't have to. But it's... I don't know, where I started from was in those kind of environments. I had to understand that there was a very strong link between thoughts and feelings. That was the first step for me. I didn't understand that. So it was becoming mindful of what was happening in my body, drilling down on that. I learned that through boxing, through breathing, through martial arts, and the feeling that I was having. So I could separate those two. And this is something that men don't do.
Men used to, like I said, like male mentorship used to be able to describe feelings in a way that men could understand. But because there's none of that, it's kind of like, that women talk about that all the time. They mentor each other. So we'll just focus on objects. We won't sort of look in the mirror. We won't internalize. We won't self-reflect. We won't care about our instincts or feelings or anything. Like, let's focus on the externalities. That's fine. It's a good separation that helps me structure the world in a very binary way that in some way makes them feel kind of that they're understanding the difference between men and women. But they're kind of cutting off so much that makes you a human being when you sever the emotional part of you as a man. I'm not saying it should guide you, but to kind of ignore and beat it down and cauterize it to a degree where, like, you don't feel much, and then you don't later on when you've done enough of that to yourself, whether through alcohol or anything, so you don't feel anything, or with drugs or whatever, and then it's kind of like, well, the guy basically doesn't have any tools to feel any better, because at the end of the day, you want to feel better. Oh, no, feelings are for women, so you just want to be neutral or apathetic or nihilistic or whatever. Well, life is meaningless. Okay, so you're just waiting for the grave. Is that it? It's like then they attack you. It's like, what's wrong with wanting to feel alive? What's wrong with wanting to feel? I'm not saying you're a woman, but it's kind of, this is a script men have been given. And again, I might sort of be biased because of my creative bent, because I want to express a lot, and I know that being in touch with that side bears a lot of fruit for me. And it's the reason, like, I get a lot out of literature and writing and creating these videos and blah, 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 blah. But if I sort of cauterize the feeling side of me and understanding my thoughts and wanting to explore ideas and those things between human beings, and then, like, I don't know why I'd get up in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought you made a good analogy in one of your videos. You said when men try to express, thoughts and feelings or speak the language of women, they just come off as ridiculous. They do. They it's awkward for them. They can't express themselves in that manner because it's not natural.
Well, look at a lot of women today when they're trying to sort of act like the worst kind of men. They're pantomiming like this clownish sort of interpretation of how they see men. And like men can't say anything about it, but like everyone, men including women, kind of cringe looking at it. It's like, you got money, you got power, but geez, get away from me. I don't want to be your friend.
And she's strutting down the street with a DP bitter in her hand. Hey, mate, how you going? Fuck off.
You mentioned something before about forgiveness. And one thing I thought about a little while ago was that in the past we had this great mechanism for forgiveness, where a man could, without the map, try different things, risk, see what he's made of. But now with the internet, where nothing's going away, what you said 15 years ago is still the same person you are now. They don't care what you say because they've got proof of it. They can play it for you. Then there's the mechanism of forgiveness is gone. So that sort of also hamstrings a man from being able to explore who he is, because it's like, I don't want to make a mistake. But you have to risk to be to sort of be a man just for yourself in terms of your thoughts and your ideas.
Yeah, definitely. I like the way you phrased it. Take calculated risks. I've done that all throughout my life. Compared to a lot of people, I'd be considered very careful in how I've sort of gone about my life, how I've sort of done things. But there's a lot of risk. But I still live my life. I'm still out there. I'm social with people, and I'm part of different community groups, and I get out there and I do my thing. I'm not going to handicap myself or close myself off from life as a result of that, because if I'm not experiencing life, then I'm handicapping myself, but I'm not understanding or learning from my experiences. I'm not understanding what's going on for me. I'm not developing. I'm not growing. The difference between me and 10 years ago is night and day. It's just 10 years. It'd be the same for you.
There's certain aspects of myself I'm actually embarrassed about the way I acted in certain ways 10 years ago.
All of us in the same boat. We didn't know any better, So we learned through experience, and that's really the only way that you can.
Or you knew it, but it just didn't click with the intensity. Sometimes you need an experience.
That's what they call it. It's referred to as compassionate self-inquiry. So you've got to have, and I think that's what's really lacking for a lot of guys today, is that there is that lack of self-compassion. They're cutting themselves off, and they're not paying attention to what's going on inside their body. Number one, they're not present. I think that's vitally important. But so they're not understanding what's going on inside the body, not understanding the reactions that they're having. We say that we write our, we write our narratives based on our past experiences. So, that's what you're referring to as cognitive distortions. It's any kind of diagnosis that you have, 99.9% of the time, it's going to be the result of childhood trauma. And that trauma, that's not the worst thing. The greatest damage done by trauma is the long-term distortions that they make, that they create. And that's going to be the way that child and the adult just perceives the world. So if you're closing yourself off, well, that's not a good thing. That internal dialogue is going to mess you up.
Yeah. It's kind of like what happened to you in childhood. You generally come out baked by the time you're in puberty. You're not going to change the foundations, but one thing that helps ameliorate some of that is recognizing that the childhood stuff is always trying to reattach itself to you. It'll never want to die. The best thing you can do is cognitively and consciously sort of be aware of it, and sort of change it moving forward. That's the way I see it. Like, I don't like the powerless aspect, but maybe that's just something I've got ingrained in me. I don't like being told what to do. I don't like being said like, no, stay in your corner. Like, there's nothing you can do because you went through this as a kid, or this girl did to you, so there's nothing you can do about that. It's like, no, not at all. Like, I refuse to. That's basically waiting to die. Like, I can't create anymore. Like, I can't move anymore. Like, no. Like, I'll show you I can.
Yeah. The amount of guys I know that have gone back to their childhood neighborhoods and all the rest of it and said, you know what, the way that person spoke to me 20 years ago, no, that's not on. I'm going to pay them a visit. And it tracked them down, knocked them on the door. What did you say to me 20 years? That person can't recall. They literally can't recall. Who are you? But they've spent all this time and all this rage and all this stress, and they've built themselves up with steroids and all the rest of it. And they're big, heavy, tattooed gang members, and they're tough and they're ready to go. Okay, this person on their doorstep, they can't remember you. They can't remember that experience. It's like they walk away. It's like they're holding on to that kind of pain.
Oh, and they'll probably get even more angry because the person's disrespecting them. They can't remember the experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all that early stress and all those early adverse experiences. They have a profound effect on the brain. So they directly shape the psychology and also neurobiology of addiction in the brain. So it's, that's how addict thinks. But it's also the way that it shapes someone who's experienced that childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I say in my last video, I said the attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. And when you're trying to treat someone, you're treating the pain. You're not treating the addiction. You're not treating, anything else. You're trying to get to that root cause. And what I try to get and drive home, the most important thing, because all my job used to be, was to get people to separate that out from the moment and the action. If they could do that, if they could walk away, they're fine. That's good.
Mm.
But the choice begins the moment that they become present. So it's the moment that you disidentify from the mind and all those conditioned patterns, those conditioned thought patterns. But until you reach that point, you're unconscious.
It's hard to kind of verbalize it to a guy, to give him handles to be able to work with it, though.
Yeah,
because describing it the way you did, I kind of know what you mean, but how do you give somebody handles to fix it?
You've got to give them something. If they're anchored in the prison, if they've got family, or you can use third-party stories, and you've got to come down to their level. Okay, what do you want for the next 10 years in your life? Okay, I want this, I want that. Are we going down this path? Like with a young man, if I'm dealing with him and he's going to go into the gang life, well, I can read that in the first 30 seconds of talking to him. Okay, he's going down this path. He's set. He's got contacts. He's set in his ways. He's going to be okay. And that life that he chooses. Other guys are unsure. Okay, well, I'm going to gauge where you're at. If we can work with you here, this is all the support structures that I can give you, and I use third-party stories. And this is what we've done for X, Y, and Z. And all these guys here have lived the life, and they're here to talk to you, guide you, support you. So try and weigh up the consequences. And what I've got is leverage and pressure. So I've got the leverage. I can open this world up to you. You've got all these support networks that average man on the street does not have. We can help you with everything from supported living to paying your phone bill to doing this, that, and the other thing. You've got all these options. We can present this to you. But if you react in the moment, you're going to end up like Jake or Paul or all these other guys. That's going to be the end result. Do you want that? No. Okay. Will you work with me? Let's draw up this agreement. Just like a self-harm contract. If I see someone that's borderline suicidal and self-harming, okay, if you're going to work with me for the next 2 weeks, you can't slice yourself up. You can't do this. You can't do that. Have I got your guarantee? Okay, let's work together. Likewise, if they're addicted, they're on drugs, okay, you've got to dry out before we go down this path. So it's getting their buy-in in the first initial thing, but you've got to make it tangible. This is going to be the result, and this is what you're going to lose.
Yeah, you got to make it attractive for them, because when you kind of look at the similarities of like the impulses towards anger, hate, violence, impulsiveness, eating, alcohol, whatever it might be. Like, this thing will make me feel good. This thing, basically something that makes you feel alive. Whether the spectrum's from horny to violence, to anger, to elation, to whatever it might be. This quick thing that will change my state. It's almost like I can't sit still. But where you can actually start to smooth out parts of your life is the sitting still part. But it's very unsexy. It's very unattractive compared to the extremes. So it's kind of trying to make the banality of where you're going to find your answers attractive compared to, I know you love skydiving, but I'm trying to sell you just sitting still and reading a book, or alone, or going for a walk. It's like, man, I can't compare to skydiving. It's the same with a guy. Like, I knew a guy once who his last couple of girlfriends were all strippers, and I mean, that was his bar. So you can imagine him trying to find a girl that was normal. You know, what excited him and what did it for him, and who he was in love with, and the stories he'd tell me about, like, oh, she did this and we went through this, but I loved her to the death and this happened. It's like, dude, you're going to find it really hard trying to sort of not lower your bar, but recalibrate it to some sort of normality. I mean, women have their own problems, but you've just found the unicorn of problems and you find that attractive. I mean, you were talking about it before, like the kind of women you're attracted to. Like, how did you kind of readjust your compass?
Well, it was I took a break from it for a couple of years, and then fuck, every man has a libido. Jesus Christ, get on the whiskey and all of a sudden you go for boys' night. Off we go. But and then you lose track of it. And I'm going to let go for a bit. I'm going to enjoy myself. And but yeah, I mean, after you have those kind of experiences, and I'd interact with so many different people, and I'd open my mind up to so many different possibilities. I'd read so many books. I've had so many experiences. I've dealt with so many different people that have just been wonderful mentors to me. And I'm sitting across from this tattooed slut, and I'm going, you're a fucking idiot. You offer me nothing. And it's I mean, that's what I'm thinking. Oh, what was I thinking? Good God. And it's all
this is what I valued?
Yeah, and you're thinking all this drama and all this bullshit that you put up with for what? Just a bit of nookie? I mean, Jesus, aim higher, man. And but I mean, with a lot of men, I mean, it's like what Stardust said in his one of his recent videos. He was talking about hypergamy, I think it was, and he was saying the difference between adaptive and maladaptive behavior. And when you look at behaviors that you have as a child or whatever, say you've experienced trauma. And what seems non-adaptive in the present, or maladaptive, that kind of self-harming or acting out or what have you, it was an adaptation, to help us endure what we had to go through as a child. So at that time, it was non-adaptive, but adaptive at the same time. But then it becomes maladaptive, and it's about stepping back and being able to identify that. But that's sort of come to Jesus moment when you look in the mirror. Except I'm looking at a tattooed woman across from me and just going, okay, right, no. Okay. Yeah, I can see where I went wrong here, and I'm not going down that track ever again. So, yeah. Yeah,
it's almost like sometimes there are moments where I kind of almost sort of laugh at the embarrassment while I'm going, on the one hand, all my virtues that I believe in and I live for, I'm talking about sort of Faust and literature and speaking well and talking well and intellect, and then this is sort of the person I pick. It's like they don't correlate.
No. So yeah, it's I mean, we've all been there. We're all men. I mean, we go out there and we interact with people, and we're they talk about nature versus nurture. Well, no. I mean, it's neither. It's a moment by moment interaction between basic genetic and environmental effects. That's what it is. It's all shades of grey.
Yeah.
So I can say definitively, don't do this, but then I might do it. Because it is dependent on the situation.
Yeah. The woman could just be in front of you. It could just be momentary. It could just be, well, what's the harm? Like, I'll go back to my single life. But you don't know that after this point you may never go back to your single life again.
Yeah. And I wish I was carved out of stone and I could just stand back and say, no, don't do that, Spetsnaz. That's wrong. That's going to hurt you. Have some self-control, man. But you've got that voice in the back of your head. I'm human just like every other man.
Well, I never lose sight of the fact that I know for myself, I don't know about you, but when I talk in my videos, when I'm talking with, someone like-minded like you, I'm not just sort of, we're talking with each other and we're ostensibly helping guys if they have anything they sort of get from this. But we're not just helping other guys, we're helping ourselves. I know that I'm helping myself every time I express these things. It's like going to the gym. I'm working on those muscles so they never atrophy.
Yeah.
So when you get sort of, especially people in the comments who sort of, all they do is just, troll, and they've never made any content, they've never written anything or whatever, and they, oh, well, you know about this thing, why are you repeating yourself? But they think it's kind of, if you know a thing, it's not just a matter of like writing a note down and sticking it in your pocket and you have it forever. Yeah. This sort of stuff needs to be exercised or it just evaporates.
Yeah.
And like we said about language, like guys can barely articulate words and string them together. How are they able to? They don't stand a chance in hell in being able to recall red pill knowledge when they need it in front of a female. So if you can't even recall the words you're saying to defend yourself, like speak articulately, how can you actually recall any ideas like, the things that spoke to you in a certain person's video and saying, oh, that was great. That really, turned on the light bulb. And then you forget it 5 minutes later and you go about your life on autopilot. The point is you've got to exercise this stuff. So then some of that content creator rubbed off on you. You've become your own person. You're going your way in terms of, sort of like absorbing all this stuff.
Yeah, you're taking it and applying to your life in a proactive way, in an actual practical way. And I used to do that when I used to listen to Bubba Rosa and Stardust. I used to sit down and I used to take notes. Okay, I'm going to play that back and I'm going to take notes because all of this was new to me. And then I took those bullet points. Okay, I'm going to take that into a real life environment and I'm going to apply it because that's just I thought that's what you need to do, because that's what you do in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
You do the work in therapy. You identify themes and patterns. These are the actions I'm going to take, and I'm going to take this, do my homework, and apply that in everyday life. So, yeah, I mean that's what I thought it was. I thought it was taking a practical approach rather than abstaining, and not, again, clarifying myself, not going out there and taking undue risks, but just in everyday situations where it could be work environment, social, all the rest of it. You're taking those bullet points, you're applying them to your life, and through practice and repetition, you're building up ways in terms of how to protect yourself, but how to interact with your environment in a risk-averse way, but at the same time getting your needs met. So that I thought it was a practical philosophy that you could adopt in life.
Yeah, for sure. Like I keep coming back to it myself. The way I feel confident about any of this stuff is its practical application and seeing if it works for me.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff I can tell that it should work or is ostensibly true, but it just might not fit for me. But as long as I tested it, it's kind of like a scientist. It can't just be theory. I'm sort of, it needs to be practical for me. All the subjects I'm interested in. I mean, the literature I read, the ones I enjoy the most, the ones that connect with the human experience, i.e. the things that I can sort of hold and tussle with and think about and talk about and talk with you about. Like, for instance, there might be subtle messages in sort of, the Lord of the Rings, but I enjoy it, but it doesn't sort of resonate with me like movies that have a very strong philosophical resonance. But the more fantastical they are, the more they lose me. It's why I like science fiction, because it talks about the human condition. There's deep questions and there's big sort of sledgehammer aha moments about you as a person and questions answered. But when it's just all escapist, it can be entertaining, kind of like porn, but it's kind of like it doesn't really mean much. I'm not gonna hold it dear. I'm not gonna buy that book and put it on my shelf and be proud and never sell it. It's like it's a disposable thing. Entertainment to me is just disposable. For anything to have longevity, information, movies, women, the longevity, the meaning of it being actually true and staying true means a lot to me, if not, everything to me. So that's why I like the transient nature of, say, women, or the transient nature of, say, the world today. It's really sort of wearying for me. Yeah. So much so, even now with everything going on, I've just gotten tired of it. But no one gives a shit about sort of the fundamental foundations of like how we relate to each other.
Yeah, but like I said in my last video, there's a lot of people that are suffering at the moment, and I've lost track of a lot of people. And I haven't adhered to anything during this whole fucking lockdown. I've gone up to cops on the street and had, pretty pointed conversations with them. These guys are just, fuck, where are you coming from? They're completely out of their depth in terms of a legal discussion. But I just did it because I was irritated. So that was bad me. It was bad Spetsnaz. But, but I was just a bit frustrated with how things, it's that people weren't questioning things. So that was my sort of way of getting in, and I slapped myself on the wrist and said bad. So I didn't do that. But yeah, I mean, there's something called, I don't know if you heard of something called bare attention. It's what the Buddhists practice. And I think every religion has some sort of, it's going to sound strange, some sort of philosophy that's akin to men going their own way. To sort of understanding the ebb and flow of what's going on basically inside and also on the outside. That's how I interpreted it. So it's, a lot of your automatic brain processes, they're based as eyes, right? So you've got 5 physical senses. Basically what bare attention is, it's mental hygiene. Right? It's noticing all the ebb and flow of all those automatic senses, but not reacting to them and not acting on them. So that's why it's called bear, because it's focusing on those different senses, but it's having control of them. We shouldn't be controlled by our emotions or our desires. But in order to do that, to get to that point, we need to be able to take a step back. And a lot of men aren't doing that. That's why you're seeing a lot of this, what's the word, simping online. And it's, I don't know. I mean, we've really done a number on young men today. We've really cast them adrift, and then we just put the blame back squarely on their shoulders. But we've all played a part in this. I mean, it's gotten to this point. And like Stardo said, it's increasing it's nearing a sort of bottleneck, what we've had at different points throughout history in different cultures. So this isn't something new, but what's new is technology driving it. So it's kind of like the only avenues permitted is to be this lesser man, or being a better female version of a man, or a version that's sort of accepted by gynocentrism, because any other kind of voice that is masculine is just, you can't find it, or it's censored. It doesn't exist. No. Because a lot of people live their lives online. They don't get out, and now they can't even get out. Your existence is fashioned by the corridors where you can reside online. The only corridors that have the lights on are these ones where you dress up as a forest creature, as you're not a man, you're something else. You put on some clownish affectations and portray yourself and you talk with a squeaky voice and you're very effeminate and all this kind of stuff. Like what's the permissible thing to be? How can I quack and walk like a duck? I'll do that. Then I exist. Then I can be seen. Then I'll have a channel or some avenue online where I can have a voice and have friends. But unless I quack and walk like a duck, I won't exist. I'll be sitting in my room at home alone, especially now with quarantine, where, basically I'm isolated. I'm on my own because I'm not quacking and walking like a duck. Well, if I want to have social interaction, I guess I'll have to. Yeah, and it limits men to such an extent. I've seen so many guys that have, tried to conform in that way. In the process, they miss out on so many different experiences and so many opportunities because they're trying to conform instead of actually, speaking from the heart. When you do that, you limit yourself in all sorts of ways. You don't experience what you should be experiencing. The basic bare tax of what it means to be a man. It's this is a hard thing. You're right. It's the very basics that you're avoiding, and then once you have the basics, then you can actually start feeling more alive. But if you don't even form the base, everything you build on it just evaporates after the moment you think you've gotten a hit of feeling confident or alive, because there's no foundation for it to rest on. So you can sort of watch porn, play video games, troll online, anything to give you a spike. But then because you don't have any foundation of you as a man, it just kind of seeps through like a spaghetti strainer, like the water just goes through. There's nothing to hold it. I can understand what a lot of guys say. If they're self-harming or engaging in kind of destructive behavior, I can understand why. So, in their formative years, bad things happen, so they didn't get the kind of, the soothing that they needed. So they're engaging in that behavior. I understand that. And to understand that, that's great. So that helps delete toxic self-judgment. I'm not responsible, and this is why I'm engaging in this, to cope with the present. But that also forces that guy, and when I'm saying forces, it puts him in a position where he can now take responsibility for the now, for the present. And that's great because that's empowering. The decision is now in his hands. You're showing him a way in which he can take, ownership and actually have empowerment in his everyday life. Okay, that's the behavior. It could be pornography, it could be drugs, it could be this, that, and the other. This is why I'm engaging in this behavior. But in order to take control of my life, I need to take a step back and see, am I getting my needs met? You can ask a guy. He's done so many things. He's been in a gang. He's hurt people. He's curb stomped people, whatever. It's like that movie, American History X. The psychologist or the teacher comes in and he says, okay, let me ask you a question, pal. He said, has any action that you've taken up to this point helped you? And I said, no. I said, okay, why are we engaging in this behavior? here's an opportunity. If you follow this path, this can happen. So you have to be able to take a step back. But a lot of guys today, it's just complete repression. It's like a child. If they experience trauma, they repress painful emotion. That's a defense mechanism. But the consequence of that is a dulling of emotional and psychological awareness. Then they can't connect the dots. All there is just this flat effect. I've had so many conversations with guys and say, okay, what are you feeling right now? I don't know. And you try and drill down, and what you find is that they'll experience highs in terms of anxiety and rage and real lows of despondency. But for the most time, for 90% of the time, it's a flat line. They experience nothing. It's numb.
Yeah, especially they can't even name what they're feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, what's it saying? If you can name it, you can tame it. But if you don't even have the words, it's kind of like it owns you. Like whenever you're emotional, whether you're angry or horny or whatever, it's like, no, that's got you by the reins and it'll control you. But if you can't even verbalize like how you're feeling, what do you want, who are you, tell me a little bit about yourself. I don't know. It's kind of like there's just they can talk about other things, but the lack of interest in themselves. The lack of selfishness is kind of it's amazing.
It becomes very dangerous because if you're not experiencing emotions, if you don't have that kind of, I guess, emotional competence and that ability or capacity to actually experience those emotions, well, you're not going to be aware of stress or what's precipitating that. So that ability to express your emotions effectively, that's going to lead to you asserting your needs, being able to maintain personal boundaries, being able to state specifically what you need in a given moment, what feels wrong in that given moment, and stating it out loud. And delienating or separating, I guess, from all those unconscious, unsatisfied needs from childhood, all that trauma from childhood, and making it present. So, no, I'm reacting to this from my past when it's not appropriate for the current situation. All those kind of those connections that you make. Physical response, okay, I'm experiencing this in my body. Why am I experiencing this? Take a step back. I'm going to state what I feel. And I understand that the world is not going to collapse by stating what I feel. This is fine. I can state this. So it's,
like that childhood stuff, it does help. Like I remember when I sort of went into my past and really took a look at it, it was good to kind of, it's almost like, you're tired of walking around with a limp generally when other people don't. And then when you find out, it's because I fell down when I was a kid and I broke this bone and whatever, now I get it. And so you can sort of frame that in your mind without, like, you have an answer for it. But if we keep everything ephemeral, if we don't have any interest, if we're apathetic to everything, especially where it's got to do with us, and just saying, what are you going to do? It's like you're a raging alcoholic who's had 3 ex-wives and you got 5 kids who don't speak to you. You can't hold down a job. You got no friends. It's kind of like, at what point are you going to kind of care about the time you've got on this plane?
Yeah, and it's that distinction. It's like when the past and the present, when they merge, when they blur. A lot of guys are going to perceive, loss, or they're going to perceive a potential threat when none exists. I've talked about that before with guys that I've known, but as a result of that, they're going to have stress. So it's going to lead to the whole chronic disruption of homeostasis. It's going to result ultimately in ill health. But a lot of those, those situations, those, I guess, painful or stressful situations, as long as you can recognize that. Make those distinctions and understand primarily, number one, that you're responsible for the way that you enter that interaction. That's what you control, and you control your reaction to it. So it's little distinction. I say little, it's probably large distinctions that a lot of guys aren't making today because they don't know. And as a result, they get big, black mark beside their name if they act out.
It's challenging too, because I know for myself, I don't like staying in my head, especially when I'm interacting with people. If I'm having a conversation with you or anyone else, it's because then you get into that habit of like, I'm not listening to what the person's saying. I'm in my head, constructing what I'm going to say next. I'm not interacting in the moment. It's the same. I don't want to be hyper alert in front of a female. like being like watching for every single move and, nuance of a behavior and, body language and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't like being on hyper alert, that sort of cortisol level of anxiety, right?
Yeah.
So part of me doesn't want to, like, I want to be sensibly aware and conscious about life, what's in front of me, not ignoring warning signs, being engaged and seeing what something is and not being afraid to voice a question and ask questions and not fearing shame and all that kind of stuff. But it's hard because sometimes if you're enjoying yourself, why would you want to sort of snap out of it?
Yeah.
So it is challenging. It can be tiring sometimes to be too consciously aware depending on the situation. I know I've been around, usually, this is the funny thing, it's always around women I'm on a date with, where once or twice I've been accused of being too much of a thinker. Though when it's platonic, when it's just females in general, they actually admire that I'm introspective and I'm curious. But it's always these women who are potential mates as like, I don't know if I could be around you. You're too much of a thinker. You've always got an opinion on this. You're looking at, reading between the lines. You just need to let go, and you think too much.
You're not thinking about me enough. That's what it means.
Oh, but it's kind of like, no. You're too aware. When I push your buttons, that you're not reacting the way I want you to. It's like, I don't like that. I want you to just sort of, when I push a button, you need to react predictably.
Yeah. And that's what they're used to, because they've probably never heard no during their whole life. And here's a guy that's critically thinking. Any kind of issue that comes up, we're going to critically discuss this. We're going to break it down. We're going to have a conversation about this, and you're going to have to justify your position. She knows it instinctively, even if you don't state it. So she's going to have to put her argument forward, and because you're thinking outside the box, you're a critical thinker. She knows that. She can't just control you. I've had the same with women. Yeah.
I remember this was later in life, like too late as far as I'm concerned, my late 30s, was when the first time I actually stood up to a woman, and I completely forgot. I treated her like a male. I kind of really stood up to her and told her to fuck off.
Yeah. And
I forgot that she was a female. And afterwards, I felt really not good that I was upset and I treated it that way, but that I actually was honest. Because I was like purely honest in the way that like I would be with another man. That was just purely honest, like stating my point of view, telling him, no, you know what, fuck off. Like, I don't want to listen to you anymore. It's just basic pure honesty and being myself, not sort of editing it through this filter of, the eggs and make her smile and, biology and all this kind of stuff.
The last long-term, I guess, relationship I had was probably about 2 years ago. In between then, I've gone out with different women, and a better class of women, I must add. But you get from a woman a lot of things. I think there was a conversation you had with Paul Elam, which I thought was great, the way that you articulated it. I think Paul asked you, I'm paraphrasing, he said, what do you get out of a relationship? I think what you said was, it's the little things. I thought that articulates it quite clearly. It is the little things. I mean, you're not going to get the kind of depth that you're going to get with another man. If you're talking about philosophy and this, that, and the other thing, or you're talking about some specific trade or this and that, But
if I want intellect, I'm not placing all my chips on a woman, even the woman in my life. I mean, it's the little things, the intangible things. I think. I mean, again, do what you want, but making life a very binary thing with no grey area of nuance. It's like either you have to, as a man, fit in on the left or the right, and there's nothing in between. You can't have any sort of personalised dials on your equalizer where you can adjust them that it's just you. These are the things that are me that I get off on. I respect myself. I try and stand up for my values, my boundaries, etc., etc. I know my limits with women. I won't do this. I won't do that. This is the arm's length that I treat, the workplace and government and whatever. Like, you're really standing up for yourself. So again, you mentioned taking these sensible, calculated and recoverable risks, because even in, on balance, you ask yourself, okay, these are the boundaries I'm engaging in this relationship, whether work, women, or whatever, right? What's the worst that can happen? The worst case scenario, if this happens, and I know there's always worse extremes, a meteor could hit, a woman could sort of falsely accuse you, blah, 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 right? But especially the way you conduct yourself. But, I don't know. It's always a funny thing sort of talking, because it is very personal. Like if it was really easy, us guys could just kind of pluck formulas, plug them into our calculator and go, we're all going to act this way because it's easy and there's no downside. But, not wanting to compare myself to sort of any pioneers or Christopher Columbus or anything, but it's kind of, there's a lot to be had in the adventure of life, but doing it as much with your eyes open and as sensibly as you can. Again, a guy doesn't want to sort of be with women because there's just too many risks, and he knows he can't say no to women, and he can never stand up for himself, and he can never tell someone to sort of fuck off or, this far but no further. If you know yourself, then more power to you. Don't, because you will be getting taken advantage of. But if you can, like a funny story, the other week, like my sister-in-law's nephew, little kid, it's about 5 years old or something, and his mother in front of us at a barbecue was saying to him, she said, well, you've been a bad boy, you need to apologize for what you did before. And he said, no. He said, why not? You need to apologize for me because of blah, blah, blah. Like he just really stood up for himself. Like, fuck, if you continue down this path, mate, you will have a great life. You will not let anyone pull the wool over your eyes. It's just such a that was innately part of his personality. And I'm thinking, I didn't even show any signs of that till I was 30.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's great. That's great. And it's like a lot of what people deal with, and it's like I say with men, a lot of it is stripping away what they aren't and finding really who they are. And who they are is essentially, ingrained in them, but it's about stripping away all that external stuff. So if you go into any kind of therapy process, well, what you're trying to strip away is all those kind of cognitive distortions. So all those inaccurate thoughts that are going to reinforce all those, negative thought patterns or emotions. And there's a whole process you go through, and there's whole things that you have to diagnose and understand. Look at things like filtering. The people who go out there and they ignore all the positive things in life. They're focusing solely on the negative. So that's all they focus on. That's all they see. You get people who just think in black and white. So it's all or nothing. There's absolutely no room for complexity or nuance. It's just this. It's black or white. There's no shades of grey. So other people overgeneralize. People just believe that everything happens to you and it's completely out of your own control. You blame people. You look at things and it should be this way. No, people should act that way. You mislabel things. Everything is because of this. It's just an extreme sense of generalizing. I feel it. So it must be true. But it's not always.
The trap is also a lot of those things are true. So you can't ignore them. For the longest time, I got sick of just focusing on what the negative was. And the negative things were true. Particularly about sort of the state of the world and women and relationships and all that kind of stuff. But it's always I'm sick of being apophatically sort of calibrated in life, where I know myself by what isn't or what I don't like. How about I go somewhere, I go my own way, I'm for something. What do I think is a step forward? I'm sick of just sitting in one spot and going, I'm not going to step on that landmine. I'm not going to do that. It's kind of fuck, what am I going to do? I hate being defensive. I'm just so sick and tired of being defensive all the time.
Having that having an expectation, I guess that people are going to change for us. Change for us as it suits us. It's not going to happen. No one is responsible for our own happiness except us. We control that. People aren't going to change for us. So we've got to separate what's true and what's not. Okay, there are risks. Okay, there's risk walking across the street. Should I not walk across the street? We've got to understand what our needs are, identify those needs, understand the risks, be present, understand what's going on inside our body, understand our thought processes, stand up for ourselves, define our boundaries. But it's only going to come through experience. And if you don't have that experience, you're going to get stepped on. That's what it comes down to. you've got to mitigate the risk. But if you don't have those experiences and build that level of resilience and that skill set, you're going to be a roadkill. I've seen this with so many men. And yeah, it's extreme examples. Guys that have been through trauma and been through that kind of background and through the system. But the same principle applies. And like when I say I've been in different avenues in my life, in different professions, in different environments, a man that shows weakness, if he's not interacting in a way that's deemed, socially acceptable, if he's not standing up for himself, he's going to get tread on. And it's up to him to actually step up and do that. But he's only going to do that through experience and applying that knowledge.
Mm. Yeah, but like we mentioned, if you don't have an interest in sort of organizing that mentally and then verbally, and then sort of like basically it's the expression of all that sort of stuff. Like, here's a solution, mental and verbal expression to sort of fix your anxiety. I'm not interested in. Well, buddy, I don't know what I can do. Like, really, you're going to have a hard time. You're just going to be a pinball being bounced around all the time and being frustrated.
Because if they're going to look back on their life 20 years from now, it's going to be a train wreck. I can guarantee it. And it's going to be a train wreck in a very subdued and very closed off way. It's not going to be a train wreck where you had an offender going out there and committing crime and, at least going out there and partying up and all the rest. I'm not recommending that as a way of life, but at least he had some experience.
Yeah, it's a difference between a protracted slow death that lasts like 60 or 80 years or someone who actually felt alive and then all of a sudden had a very Archimedean point where he died. Like, he died in a very short amount of time compared to dying over 80 years.
Yeah. And it's like you talk about mental acuity and all the rest of it. That needs to be practiced, and that needs to be – otherwise your mind's going to go, your body's going to go. What you don't exercise, you're going to lose. Either use it or lose it. So it's – yes, men have been cast adrift, but men now need to find their own way. And you're not going to find that way if you just close yourself off from experiences and from life. Yeah,
like we mentioned, though, I think Stardust has mentioned it too. This the environment that men are growing up now in, the virtual environment.
Yeah,
it's just so unreal. It was kind of hard enough back 10, 15 years ago when guys were making virtual content based on reality.
Yes.
Now guys are, if they are making content, it's virtual content based on virtual reality. And they're about the only areas you can exist. And as I said, you can only exist as a, decasexual furry who identifies as blah, 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 and who's married to a chair. I don't know. But you know what I mean? It's just a circus. So I don't know. I have sympathy for sort of what guys have to contend with these days. Because I find it challenging enough refining myself based on my foundations. And when I look at what their foundations are today, it's not even sand, it's just gas.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the suicide rates for men have spiked. I mean, it's the highest it's been since World War II. Right. Depending on the source that you look at, I mean, from what I can deduce, I may be wrong, but it looks like there's been a spike of, if you take the whole suicide rates of every demographic, by about 50%. 50% spike over the past 10 years for males. It's astonishing. And it's quite alarming that a lot of the guys are the Gen X guys, and that they're the highest suicide prevalence, the highest demographic, and that's carried through from teenage years.
What's Gen X again? What years to what years?
God, that's 70-something to
69 to 80 or 90
could
something?
Be. Yeah,
something
100%. Like yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. Well, they've got the highest suicide rate. And they have since they were teens, and that's carried through. And I think a lot of that was the boomers put them in front of a TV set, and there was no mentorship. And it was just
maybe it's the split between what you saw, the split between the pamphlet to what the reality was.
Yeah, no, a lot of those guys grew up and they had no male guidance, they had no male mentors. And it was a lot of political correctness apparently sort of seeped in during the 90s. And a lot of that just became, selective censorship, what you could and couldn't talk about and all the rest of it. And they really piled it on. So we've had about 30 years of that, of just this, just this attack on masculinity and
Well, for me, I mean, like, you can either put your hands up in the air. Like, I'm never going to try and keep finding my own answers and speaking up for what I think is right in my own life and doing the content because I find it fulfilling and enjoyable and I think it's important. But also, like, what's the alternative? Do nothing and say, look, what are you going to do? It's kind of like the old, women are this way, what are you going to do? Now the world is this way, what are you going to do? It's kind of like, well, this is the world you have to live in. You have to sort of, even if it's only the impact of your immediate world, you sort of need to make some sort of an impact of what you think is right, how you think you should speak, how you need to conduct yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to be led around like a dog.
And there's a lot of things that you talk about in terms of articulating your thoughts and writing things down and then getting clear about what you want and getting clear about certain things. I think it was Stephen King. He had a line. He said, "Kill your darlings." That's when he was referring to writing. He said, get rid of all the fancy dialogue and all the bullshit. Get rid of that. And he said, and just get to the message. What you want to express yourself succinctly and clearly about what you want, what your objective is. I think that's a great way. You can look at different writers like fucking Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code, and it's just obscene. There were certain lines that he said. What was it? He said he observed the night setting in, making the day go dark. Or the bullet chased him down the street. It's a fucking retard. But and people buy this shit. Oh God, just turn the brain off to read it. But
it's creative.
Brutal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Well, I mean, it's why Hemingway was so popular. He said things clearly, very simply.
Yeah. But I think you're onto something there, and journaling has always been an essential part of cognitive behavior therapy. It's essential. So you can take that, you can note things down, get clear bullet points in, and just work off that. Okay, we're going to address these, identify themes, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, you're right. Do men have sort of the impetus to get involved with that? Yeah.
Oh, but just for me, the liberating aspect of kind of writing down, like for the first time when I sort of became interested in writing around the age of 30, I remember just reading some of my own thoughts in my journal and going, fuck, is this me? Like I never realized, because if you don't see it almost as a third person, because it's like we all hate our own voices when we hear them back. Yeah. It's like, is that how I sound audibly? But sometimes you don't know how you sound or actually who you are until you hear yourself speaking, like the words, or read your thoughts on paper. Like until you can actually, as a third person, see the expression of who you are in one way or another, whether it's, I understood myself more where I was and where I wanted to be when I started reading my own thoughts as a writer. And then now when I started actually speaking in front of camera, it was kind of another paradigm where I could sort of see myself in another way. It's like, is that how I seem to people? Is that how I talk? Is that how I animate myself? And it's not sort of being critical now, adjusting myself to seem cosmetically presentable in some sort of superficial way, but it's kind of like no, this is how close to how someone sees me express myself. And then on paper, this is the thoughts that are in my head. This is how I'm articulating it. Do I use the word I, or do I use the word we? Do I use the word them? Am I blaming a lot? Am I taking ownership? All of that stuff's invaluable to absorb. And then you start seeing like yourself as a third person, and you go like, I want to make this person better. I want to take ownership of this, but I want to take care of this person better. Like rather than being this sort of free floating sort of, like I said, pinball that gets pushed around by the world, and you just sort of mouth the platitudes of what women want and what society expects of you. It's like a lot of power in that.
Yeah, and it's vitally important. Like you say, recording yourself as well. That's a great thing that all men should do. Then you can hear your own voice, and you can hear how you come across to people. You can see where you need to put certain inflections in different words, how to enunciate certain different words. Get rid of fillers, which I hate. When someone said like this and like that, and it just drives me out the wall. I've just got low patience for that. But
I do a lot of that myself. I'm trying to sort of curb that too. I say a lot, and I can't remember. There's one or two other phrases that I use as fillers before I want to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I do it myself. I say, and all the rest of it. But, it's little things like that. But it's sometimes what I used to do was speak slowly enough to actually feel a little uncomfortable doing it. And, you could use 6 words in a row and then stop. Speak faster when you're engaged about, passionate about something. Speak slower when you're trying to get a point across. Little bits of nuance like that. I know I can go. I can go into a meeting with guys that are far more knowledgeable than I am. They've got far more behind their names and all the rest of it. But I know I can go in there and I can engage with them in a manner that they're not going to question me. I'm going to go in there and we're going to engage in a very simple, very clear manner. But I have no intimidation there, and they're not going to try and talk over me or the rest of it because they know I'm confident, I'm self-assured, and I've given that impression. So it's a vital skill that men need to learn, and to laugh at the right time and to do this. It's at the beginning, it feels like you're pressing buttons. That's what it felt like for me.
Yeah, but, it's almost like you're hacking biology, because a lot of biology is like the pecking order of hierarchy. So the same with women, how you naturally react to women, or how you naturally react to authority in another man. But as you sort of focus on yourself more and you take responsibility, you're in other people. When you're in front of, say, someone who's a CEO, it's like, yeah, I might be in this job, but you've got no authority over me as a person.
Yeah.
Like you really see yourself as an autonomous person. And when you do take responsibility, it's like the buck stops with me. Yeah, but that's not scary. It means like no one can touch me now. Yeah. Like I'm not afraid of anything. I'm just afraid of my own bad choices. That's all I need to focus on now.
Yeah, it's essential. Essential to know that, to understand it, and to experience it, and to practice it, and put that into everyday practice. Just like red pill knowledge, I guess.
Well, we've been going for about nearly 2 hours. Probably leave it there. Cool, that was good. That was good. We should do it more often. Thanks again for making the time, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. Cool.
Anyway. All right, dude.
No, mate.
Catch ya. Enjoy your day.
Yeah, you too.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. To be notified of my content, hit the bell icon and select all. Link and share, comment below, and join my Discord for real-time conversations with me and other subscribers. If you'd like to support me directly, there are donation options below. I really appreciate all of you who do. Thank you.